You're listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mattison, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashton Kirsch with the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Thank you all for joining today. We're going to be discussing a fascinating topic, a topic that is incredibly close to my heart because it's my livelihood. It's what I do. It's my, one of my very many passions, realistically, and that is just subrogation in general. We're going to talk about what is subrogation and what are the societal benefits of subrogation. Why is what we all do so important to the insurance industry, and not just the insurance industry, but the world as a whole, right? Our government, our politics, our judiciary. So today it's my honor to have my partner, fellow shareholder at Mattison, Wickert & Layer, Gary Wickert, with me today. How's it going, Gary?
Hello, Ashton. Good to be with you once again.
And how's everything down in Texas?
Man, I got to tell you, for those people who don't know, I ended up relocating to our Austin office here at Mattison, Wickert & Layer, primarily for personal reasons. I'm chasing grandchildren. My wife, Lisa, and I moved down here in July when it was like 173 degrees because I've got two sons down here, one of which, Lee Wickert, who's now a partner as of this year with the firm in our Austin office, and my son who works with NASA down here. But I've got 4 grandkids as well and 2 daughters-in-law. So we're kind of just staying close to family. And I have to tell you, I'm really enjoying the winter, Ashton. Yesterday I was in the pool. 2 days ago, I was laying out reading in the sun, and it was 75 degrees. So I know what it's like back up in Hartford.
Yeah, we had frozen fog last. I've never heard of frozen fog, but I was looking at the weather advisory and it's like frozen fog. And I had to Google, what is this? And yeah, it's just that. It's fog that freezes and makes it terrible to drive. But either way, Gary, from what I hear, it's happy down there. It's a good place. You can actually fit in with the cowboy boots and maybe start wearing a cowboy hat again.
Hey, I've got a cowboy hat, believe it or not.
All right, so on to the fun stuff for the audience today. So, as an introduction, I think that in the industry, the insurance industry just in general, subrogation for years was, the subro department was hidden in a basement somewhere behind the water heaters, and really it wasn't given much attention. But I think that's changed recently, and I speak at a ton of industry groups, and you see subrogation now becoming front and center, where people are going to school, wanting to come out and wanting to get into subrogation. Me, this is all I want to do. I love this stuff. But the industry, in the insurance industry specifically, has really come to recognize that this is a way to bring in dollars tax-free, where the adjusters aren't now just figuring out how they can limit what's being paid by the carrier. They're actually creating value for their company. They're bringing in money, and it's just a fascinating thing. So, a number of years ago, actually, Gary has really been at the forefront of this, and he's been pushing the societal benefits of subrogation and really has helped to change the industry in general. And Gary wrote a really interesting article that's published on our blog and our website, and it's titled The Societal Benefits of Subrogation. And that's kind of what I want to discuss today, Gary. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds great, Ashton.
Well, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about that, the societal benefits of subrogation.
Well, keep in mind, I do have a little more experience than you in terms of when I first started practicing law. We didn't even have IBM Selectric typewriters, and I know that makes me sound old.
Well, that's what you used to use that's where you took a brick of rock and you kind of chiseled and,
Yeah. Well, I started practicing literally back when subrogation was almost unknown. I've said this at many conferences and during many speeches and talks that 4 of our largest subrogation recoveries over the years have been in cases which the files had been marked no subrogation potential. And it's just not recognized, and it certainly isn't pursued. I know you and I will be in London talking with some of our Lloyd's market, London market clients later this spring. And I have to tell you that for sure in the London market, subrogation was sort of that red-haired stepchild. It wasn't looked at much at all. And that's for a number of reasons. I think in our industry, the claims professionals have been historically overworked with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of files that they have to deal with. And let's face it, subrogation is it's work, and it's an opportunity that comes dressed in overalls with a lunch pail. And it does take work to aggressively pursue it and increase and maximize your recovery. So throughout the years, I think subrogation has slowly but surely gotten a foothold within the industry to the point now where many insurance companies have dedicated recovery units instead of having the claims people wear two hats. A lot of these subrogation professionals are compensated based on performance. There are rewards, there are challenges, and the companies have gradually begun to recognize the importance of bringing money in as opposed to just paying it out. They're very good at the latter, but they haven't historically been good at the former. So that's what the article was intended to be, is sort of to recognize that, hey, these people, they have an important function within the company. They bring money in. But over the years, I realized that there was a lot more to subrogation than just a check with a number on it. And that's, I think, what you and I should discuss today, because there are thousands and thousands of subrogation professionals out there in the world who perhaps don't recognize the impact that they are having on society, on our economy, and quite literally on the world as a whole through this humble profession we call subrogation.
And it's hugely important, Gary. I mean, we think about just the bottom line for the carriers. Subro is what's keeping many of these carriers in the black. It's largely recession-proof. This is money that's coming in to supplement maybe a loss in premium or anything else, right? The carrier is able to really impact their bottom line by focusing on subrogation. And I've seen this, through and through with many, many different carriers when they're coming to us and asking myself, you, other attorneys with the firm, to go and train their team and do trainings, webinars, in-person seminars, go to industry group conferences and talk about subrogation. I mean, this is something that's at the forefront and really, the cutting edge for many of these carriers trying to find new ways, creative ways to push Subro forward and to recover those dollars. I think that things have changed, at least even since I've started practicing, where a lot of our clients, the first party adjuster handled everything from adjusting the claim to dealing with the appraisers to then also, handle subrogation. And some carriers do it that way. Perfect. Those adjusters need a lot of training because they're, jacks of many trades and they wear a lot of hats. But more and more carriers are now building designated subrogation groups where there's subrogation professionals who that is all that they do. And I think that's been a huge part in putting this relatively to the forefront and in changing insurance companies' mindsets on how subrogation works.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that there is a battle going on, sort of the insurance Armageddon battle, like something out of the book of Revelation. Joe Abercrombie once said that a man is measured by his enemies, and we'll probably get into it today. But subrogation is under attack, and it's under attack by some very formidable foes, especially trial lawyers who are very, very capable. Plaintiffs' lawyers, lobbies, the American Association for Justice. These are folks who want to destroy subrogation and all of the benefits that it has, which we'll talk about. But they're doing it because it is their enemy. Subrogation affects their bottom line, and they really don't care much about the societal benefits or any of the other benefits of subrogation on the insurance industry or on America's small businesses. They are more concerned with, their attorney's fees and things like that. Nothing wrong with that. But it is, let's just admit it, there is a battle ongoing. And we have to be alert and vigilant, because just like any other right, if that right is not protected, it can be lost. And hopefully after this podcast, your listeners will understand that there's a whole lot more that could be lost than simply recovering money with a number on a check.
And that's why it's so important that the subrogation professional be prepared and know how to have this conversation and explain the importance of subrogation, be it to a plaintiff's attorney who's trying to, negotiate down their lien, or to anybody else for that matter. I mean, think about the unique place where subrogation fits and in just legislation in general. In all the states, the legislatures that don't understand what subrogation is, and they're constantly trying to change things because in their mind, it's somehow unfair for the insurance company to recover. I mean, you even have unique situations, which we could give a whole podcast on, which frankly, actually we did one of the first episodes about the recent changes in Florida law, right? Where you have this really unique scenario where, the insurance companies absolutely benefit from many of the changes in the tort reform, but the subrogated carriers, the subrogation side, doesn't benefit, right? And nobody's really speaking up on the subrogation side. And that's where it's so important. And we always convey to our clients, to anyone who will listen, just this, subrogation is important, it's essential, and it fits a major role in not just keeping premiums down, but also talking about some additional societal aspects that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Now, one thing that was unique is, I recently did a radio interview, and in that interview, the host was asking me a series of questions about subrogation, because most people don't even understand, the layperson doesn't always know what subrogation is. And he was saying to me, well, you know what, Ashton, subrogation, this sounds kind of unfair. Isn't that what premiums are for? Isn't that why the insured's paying? Why can the carrier then just go against somebody else, right? Why can they do that? That doesn't seem equitable. At which point, I have my canned speech, as any subrogation attorney or person in the industry probably does, explaining what subrogation is. The subrogee steps into the shoes of the subrogor and acquires all legal rights the subrogee has with regards to the subject of the claim, right? I mean, it's the general idea. We're stepping into the shoes of the insured, and we are thereafter going against the tortfeasor or the at-fault party to make sure that the liability or the risk or the payment is allocated to the party who deserves to have it allocated to them. It's creating a fair system. It's making things equal and even, and really just creating, broadly speaking, justice in the world of claims.
So have you been to, let's say, a party, or you're out socializing and someone says, Ashton, how's it going? Now, what do you do again? And you say, well, I'm a lawyer. Oh, wonderful. What kind of law do you practice? And you say, well, it's called subrogation. And you try to explain what you do the way you just explained it. And you still have the deer in the headlights looking back at you. And ultimately, and sometimes, unfortunately, you just have to basically say, look, okay, when you're rear-ended and your insurance company pays to repair your car, they then sue the guy who rear-ended you to recover their payments and your deductible, and that helps hold down your premiums. Oh, okay. And they suddenly, their eyes light up and they realize what you're talking about, even though they've never heard of it before. So I think the work you do, the work our firm does, the work I've done over the years to try and draw people's attention. When I say people, I mean judges, litigants, legislators, society as a whole, to draw people's awareness to what this phenomenon is real important, because before anybody can appreciate the benefits of it, they have to understand what it is. Georgia, you love Georgia, work comp subro.
My favorite. I love
everybody. Everybody listening to your podcast is, oh yeah, we love Georgia, because Georgia they drank the Kool-Aid. That, well, we can't have these big, wealthy insurance companies getting money back, so we're going to legislate that the work comp carrier cannot get any of its money back or any credit until that employee is made whole, which is almost an impossibility to prove. So I wrote, speaking of explaining what subrogation is, I wrote twice now to every member of the Georgia legislature, Democrats, Republicans, independents. And I said, guys, do you understand that you're harming the many small businesses and large businesses throughout Georgia by having such a crazy, crazy requirement, which is de facto anti-subro? And I received only a few responses. I got a response from some guy who was running for governor. And basically the response was, so what is this? What is subrogation again? And these are our legislators. These are our governors. These are our leaders, and they don't understand the concept. So I think for those subro professionals who are listening today, I think you should be able to come away with a very good feeling about what it is you do for a living, rather than thinking it's just recovering dollars for your clients, which can be very unsatisfying. And trust me, I was a personal injury lawyer for the first several years of my career. And one of the things that brought me over to the side of truth and justice, i.e. subrogation, is I wasn't feeling very rewarded when somebody was hurt badly. And all I could do for them was put a check in front of them. I wasn't helping make them better. I didn't help with rehab. I didn't get them walking again. I was just putting, now, and mind you, money is obviously can help them do all those things. But I turned to subrogation because I saw some of the many benefits of subrogation. Now, I'd love to get into some of them if you want.
Let's do it. Let's get into it, Gary.
All right. So obviously, first and foremost, subrogation recovers money back for the insurance company, but it places the loss on the wrongdoer or the tortfeasor who caused the loss in the first place. America is the country of individual responsibility and accountability. Maybe not so much lately here, it feels like, but I mean, historically, that's what America is. And that is one of the premises of our Constitution and our American system of civil justice and criminal justice. So subrogation puts the loss and the onus and the burden of an unfortunate accident on the person who did the wrong, on the person who was careless, the person who was at fault, the person who was drinking while driving, instead of the innocent family or the innocent business or the innocent governmental entity whose property was damaged, whose person was injured. It makes the person responsible for causing the loss in the first place, responsible for the financial implications of it. Think about it. If every time you got in an accident, the other side just went to their own insurance company and took care of everything, there'd be no ramifications at all, aside from maybe being cited for speeding or drunk driving or something. But what happens with subrogation, through one of its main purposes, is they place the loss on the tortfeasor whose insurance company must now answer. And so that insurance company now looks at their insured and says, wow, you were driving 87 miles an hour in a 55 and you caused this accident. I think I'm going to raise my rates on you. And so the burden and the cost of that loss is put on the person who caused the loss. I think that's fair. I don't know. What about you? Doesn't that sound like that's the way things should be?
Sounds fair to me, Gary. And also, I think similarly, and I'm sure you're going to get into it, is the idea of how that impacts the loss ratio and how it's going to actually come back and impact our insureds, our client insured's premiums, where not only are we doing a benefit to society and a benefit to just the world out there by helping recover deductibles, which is a huge part of this. Another thing we could talk about for hours. But not just are we bringing back in the deductible and the money for our driver who is not at fault or our individual insured who wasn't at fault, but we're also making sure we keep down their premiums so they're not hit with a loss on their record that wasn't recovered. Briefly touch.
Let me go ahead and this is 40 years of subrogation experience has embellished in my brain 11 very real and positive benefits of subrogation. First and I'll just go through them and we can dissect them a little more. But number one is it places the loss on the wrongdoer or the tortfeasor who caused the loss. We just discussed that. Number two, it prevents a double recovery, and it prevents the policyholder, the insured, from getting more than he or she bargained for from his or her insurance policy. Number three, as you mentioned, Ashton, it helps hold down premiums. Number four, it gives, and some of these many of our listeners are going to go, wait, what? It does what? Number four, it gives consumers more and better choices of insurance. Number five, and this is the one that raises eyebrows, it actually reduces the number of lawsuits. What's crazy about that, we can get into that more, is that most people, including, let's just lay it out, in the world of American politics, Republicans, conservatives are usually more pro-business, whereas plaintiffs are and Democrats and liberals are a little bit more plaintiff-oriented. How do I know that? Because most judges who are plaintiff-oriented have run as Democrats, and there are more judges. There are judges out there who are more business-oriented, more defense-oriented. And lawyers always like to get in the right court, and there are whole websites you can go to look to. But so you have this dichotomy of Republicans and conservatives being a little more in favor of insurance companies, not across the board, but even Republicans, even conservatives, and tend to sort of eschew this idea of subrogation because they think it means, oh, you're going to have Hartford Insurance Company or Aetna or CNA filing a bunch of crazy lawsuits for $2,000, clogging up our courts. What's cool about benefit number five, it reduces the number of lawsuits. We can get into that more, and I'll explain how. Number six, as you mentioned, in the world of workers' compensation, which is probably the number one, aside from payroll, the number one cost of doing business in America, is we have a system whereby we have to have workers' compensation coverage, every state except Texas, that is. And work comp operates, its underwriting operates with the feature known as experience mods. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know what those are. It's an underwriting function that helps grade how careful, how risky, how expensive an insured could be for a particular insurance company. And if you're a good risk, guess what? Your premiums are lower. So subrogation holds down those experience mods, which holds down the cost of premiums, which holds down the cost of doing business in America. Okay, that's number six. Number seven, risk management. We don't think about this, but subrogation actually helps eliminate future exposures, because the dynamics and the mechanics and the intricacies of any loss, especially injuries in the workplace, are looked at quite carefully through the eyes of potential subrogation. It helps risk managers eliminate future exposure. And I'll even go one step further. It saves lives. We don't think about that when we're trying to collect on a subrogation claim. It's just another file on our desk, but it has that benefit as well. We can talk more about that in a second. Work comp credits. We don't think about this. It's not technically subrogation. We're not getting back money when we make a third-party recovery after a work comp claim. We are getting back money, but even beyond getting back your work comp lien, in almost every state, and of course, guess which state doesn't do this? There's a couple, but one of them is our good friend Georgia. You also get a future credit, which helps take down a reserve and favorably affect that experience mod again. So getting a future credit is different than getting a subrogation recovery. There's that benefit. Number 9, I think that, and I know you in particular have something an experience that you're working on, in a file that you're working on, and a TV appearance you recently made that'll help testify to this. But subrogation fulfills, I think, societal roles that are being abdicated by various sectors of society. We can talk more about that. Number 10, you mentioned deductibles. There's an entire body of law out there. There's a chart on our website that helps delineate the 51 different jurisdictions and laws with regard to when there is a successful subrogation recovery, insurance companies must sometimes reimburse an insured's deductible in full or in some pro rata formula. Every state is different, but that's an important role. And for some insured out there, an independent operator, truck driver, getting back a deductible of $500 or $1,000 or more is huge. And that's when they learn how to spell subrogation, when they get that check back. And lastly, number 11, the whole area of downtime claims and DIV claims, these are things that maybe aren't covered by first-party coverage, but our insureds are left out there with those losses unreimbursed. They can't afford an attorney, and sometimes these claims are small, but they can't go pursue them on their own. But guess what? When the insurance company is doing the heavy lifting and is building their subrogation case, they often can and should, and we do, get involved with our insureds and sometimes bring those downtime claims and DIV claims along with the subrogation claim. Hey, by the way, are you, I was talking to Lee earlier, are you doing a downtime and claim podcast?
Yeah, actually, Lee and I are speaking very soon, and it should be actually the podcast after this one that's released. Lee,
I want to listen to that.
We're going to be discussing downtime claims, loss of use, and kind of advice and guidance for carriers, and then also motor carriers and owner-operators on how to pursue those claims and some tips and tricks there.
Good. I want to listen to that.
Yeah, and one other thing I'm going to add on, Gary, to your statement on that kind of bullet point, on those additional damages we can help our insureds be able to recover where they otherwise wouldn't, is there are some situations, even on work comp claims, where we can step in, and we have historically been able to assist on really difficult, maybe slips and falls on ice, where no plaintiff's attorney wants to take that case. But because we're able to kind of join forces and the carrier, the work comp carrier, gets involved early, they immediately have that case because they know the injury occurred. They investigate. Maybe they even bring in counsel, like has happened with us before. And I've had a number of situations where we get involved. That family calls us up begging for us to help them, that they can't find a plaintiff's attorney or they trust us. And in some jurisdictions, we can even enter a JPA, a joint prosecution agreement. And we then can step in and assist as plaintiff's counsel and also in counsel for the subrogated carrier and create value where, a case just wouldn't have been pursued in the first place.
You know what's interesting, and I may actually have to amend my list of 11 benefits, societal benefits of subrogation to 12, because if you think about it, pursuing those claims, those downtime claims, that truck driver who, and let's face it, as everyone listening to this podcast knows, your insureds are often very indifferent, and that's putting it mildly, about your subrogation efforts. And we often need their cooperation, sometimes need their participation, sometimes need their body to be present at depositions or trials. Well, their claim is all done with. They don't need anything to do with that. Well, guess what? If they have some interest in this case, if they have a dog in this fight, they are now suddenly fully engaged, which improves the subrogation claim. And here's number 12. I think that this produces sort of a customer relations, PR, marketing function in addition to everything else. If your insured is out there and they're saying, you know what, my insurance company, XYZ, actually got me my deductible back. I had to pay $1,000 deductible when my tractor trailer was wrecked. And they went and sued the guy who wrecked it and sent me a check for $1,000. I'm going to stay with that company rather than go with whoever has the next commercial on TV for truck insurance.
And Gary,
Um,
similar to that would be a lot of large loss fire claims where there's a failed product. Frankly, most of the time, but for the insurance carrier getting involved, you don't often see a lot. Well, first off, plaintiffs' attorneys have no idea what they're doing, generally speaking, in a complex products case, right? But we have that expertise. The carrier knows what they're doing. They know the experts to hire. And I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you how many times insureds have come to me on fire claims where we've hired an engineer. We've done a joint scene. We're at the lab. We've done the lab. We now have held the manufacturer responsible for a defect, at which point that insured is so thankful because they had no idea. And frankly, a lot of times they're not out anything. They're fully covered, but they just want to know why, who was responsible here? Why did this happen? Tell me I didn't do something wrong, right? And then we're able to go to them and say, hey, look, this was a defect. It wasn't on you. And hey, we recovered our money back paid, helping with your premiums, bringing your deductible back, and plus giving you the peace of mind that, that they did everything that they could to hold the party responsible. And I've had, letters in the mail, Christmas cards from insureds. I mean, it is a very true thing that there is a big customer service aspect here. So I think that's a very well-received point.
all right, we're at 12 then, officially. So we can go back and discuss in a little more detail some of these. I know you don't have a whole lot of time, but
Yeah, let's start with you had mentioned one that's interesting to me, and one that you don't, that almost seems antithetical to, just claims litigation in general. And that was the idea that subrogation reduces the number of lawsuits. Can we touch on that briefly? Because I'm pretty sure the audience is going to be fascinated by that one.
Sure. You can find online a whole lot of arguments of people who are anti-subrogation, and they have their reasons for being anti-subrogation. There's a gentleman out there. He's a law professor. I can't think of where he is a law professor at. His name is Roger Barron. Roger is sort of the Gary Wickert and the Ashton Kirsch of anti-subrogation. He's a professor, and he's hired by plaintiffs' attorneys to talk about how subrogation is dysfunctional and we shouldn't have subrogation. I was actually on a radio program called Radio Health Journal hosted by Reed Pence. It's 425 radio stations. We had an hour-long debate. It was a virtual debate. I went on, made my points. Roger Barron went on. But one of the main arguments of anti-subrogation advocates, and even like I said, some conservative lawmakers who try to squelch subrogation in legislation for a variety of reasons, mainly because they misunderstood or don't understand what it is, argue that it increases the number of lawsuits. And that's intuitive. I mean, if you think about it, of course it increases the number of lawsuits because, well, these subrogation firms are hiring subrogation attorneys like Ashton and Gary, and they're filing lawsuits out there on their subrogation claims. So clearly it must increase the number of lawsuits, and therefore we want to discourage increasing number of lawsuits, and so we're going to discourage subrogation. But I think the specious aspect of this is that it actually does just the opposite. If you think about it, subrogation represents some of the most basic elements of let's say a personal injury case. Okay, we pay in work comp, we pay medical expenses and lost wages. Those are some of the most basic examples or elements of a personal injury case. Now, if we bring a subrogation action, even on a small claim, a lot of times plaintiffs' attorneys will look at those cases and they'll tell their potential client, well, I would take this, but you don't have a lot of damages here. And the first money that's recovered is going to have to, in theory, go to the insurance company who is going to subrogate, and therefore they don't take the case. And this happens hundreds of thousands of times across the country every year, where potential claims are turned down, and once the insured talks to an attorney and they decide not to pursue a subrogate or a lawsuit, the cases end up settling. The subrogation case settles. So many doubtful or borderline cases that they're just not brought. In fact, many lawyers advise their clients not to pursue them for that reason. So, and here's it's more than anecdotal though, and it's more than me thinking that this happens all the time. There's a very significant U.S. Supreme Court case called Sereboff versus Mid-Atlantic. It's in our ERISA book, and for those people who do health insurance subrogation, you're familiar with that case. In that case, it was being argued to the U.S. Supreme Court, and Justice Antonin Scalia commented during oral arguments on a health insurance subrogation case that was brought before the U.S. Supreme Court. And they were facing a question of whether or not to allow reimbursement to ERISA-covered health insurers. And in response to Justice Anthony Kennedy's question about whether subrogation should be allowed in cases where the final settlement was less than the amount paid by the health insurance company or plan, Scalia replied in here, wait a second, I've got the quote somewhere. Oh, here it is. Quote, presumably such a weak claim would not be brought because there's nothing at the end of it, close quote. So conversely, the absence of subrogation encourages the hypothetical plaintiff above to bring his lawsuit every time. That is why plaintiffs' lawyers hate subrogation. And it's like the Shakespeare play. I can't think of the play, and I'm embarrassed, where the Shakespeare says, first, let's kill all the lawyers. You know, that's not because they hate lawyers. It's because lawyers protect the rights of the individuals. That's what Shakespeare was talking about. And here, what I think is fascinating is Scalia is acknowledging that subrogation has the effect of reducing lawsuits. So it's not just me saying it. And this is especially true for the small subrogation suits, or the small lawsuits, rather.
Very well said, Gary. I would hate to have been Professor Barron or whomever that was who had to debate you on that issue. Gary, another one that you had mentioned was that kind of sticks out to me. The point of subrogation saves lives, right? I feel like that could be a bumper sticker given out at one of these conferences. I'll yell over to the marketing team over there to maybe build on those. Hey, Jamie. But, you know, the idea of subrogation saving lives, it seems a little bit fluffy, but, you know, the more I think about that, I mean, it's 100% true. You know, an example case that I was just, you know, I didn't even prepare one on this, but I was just thinking about is a few years ago, I had a case where single vehicle accident, guy's driving down the highways down south, and next thing you know, he's off the highway, rolls, and he passes away. And we have this case, work comp pays, I think, you know, $300,000 in death benefits, something around there. And we get the case to review, and I look at the photographs from the scene, and there's this huge lip. It was like a 10-inch lip on the side of the road, like a fall off, right where he hit. So what happened is, assumptively, he hit, tried to correct, the tire was off the roadway, and the vehicle rolled, and the individual sadly died. And in that situation, I recall that, you know, we initiated a claim, we went through litigation, and eventually we recovered. And hey, guess what? That roadway that was incredibly dangerous for years, I believe it was over a decade, people were complaining about this road. Well, that lawsuit is actually what it took to force them to send out the right people to fix the road and to make it safe. So that would be a situation where, but for our bringing a subrogation action, that road would probably be the same it is now and possibly killing people. So, you know, getting into that further, I mean, tell me a bit about how you think that subrogation saves lives.
Well, it's funny because I've handled a number of those pavement edge drop-off cases, and I don't care how experienced of a driver you are, the tendency to overcorrect, which leads you to veer into the oncoming lane of traffic, is almost unpreventable, which makes something as benign as a little bit of a lip on a highway very, very serious. And a subrogation demand, and this is true in a case I handled in Indiana, a subrogation demand instantly brought the highway department out, and they corrected over 6 miles of highway and presumably prevented a great number of accidents, which could have led to injuries or deaths. But I'm going to use, there's a guy named Bob McNeil who for years was the manager of subrogation recovery at Liberty Mutual, and he was interviewed by a magazine called Risk and Insurance. And he was asked about the function of subrogation and risk management and how those two intertwined. And here I think I have it right here. Here's what he said. He said, using subrogation, we can make a significant bottom line contribution to our customers' work comp costs, reducing their paid losses, maintaining their experience modification ratings, and that's all great. But ultimately, we can also mitigate and eliminate future losses, future exposures. So what he's talking about is the interplay between risk management, underwriting, and subrogation. And with work comp subrogation, it almost goes beyond the scope of our discussion, but rating bureaus, both private and the few public rating bureaus like the ones they have in California, their job is to go out and look at these dangerous places to work and say, you're not going to get coverage unless this gets fixed, and this gets fixed. And these are all things that are spawned by subrogation claims. I mean, obviously OSHA plays a big role here, and they come out when there's a death and they'll cite somebody for not having guards on a machine. But this is what subrogation does as well. So to perhaps a lesser degree, we can claim some credit for helping prevent future exposures, as Bob McNeil says, prevent injuries, and yes, even save lives.
Which is a perfect transition into the final one that I want to discuss, which was you had mentioned societal roles being abdicated. I mean, that's similar to what you're saying. And we see the ability to kind of get to the forefront of a lot of issues that, maybe claims are too small. And the only way that you're actually going to be able to litigate or pursue a claim is by combined claims. Or there's plenty of things where everything's covered. Examples being, we're right now in litigation against Kia and Hyundai in Central District of California for the theft claims and the theft endemic around the country. Other examples would be the California wildfires or just wildfires in general. A lot of times these losses are fully insured, right? Where the primary loss is the property that was insured, meaning that the majority of damages, and of course there's also terrible loss of lives and other things, but some of these and many of these wildfires, the only claims, their vast majority, are going to be insurance claims in the subrogation therefrom. And ultimately, you see situations where we're able to force utility companies, right, where they're changing procedures. They're taking things seriously because the one thing that has the biggest hit on business and making them change their ways, sadly, it's not morals, it's not ethics, it's not even best practices, but it's the potential for their pocketbook, their wallet to get impacted by a heavy hitting lawsuit.
Yeah, well, think about this. You're absolutely correct. The role that you're playing in the Kia and Hyundai claims is significant, and your listeners should be checking with you if they have any of those claims. I think we tend to think, as experienced subrogation professionals tend to think, well, there's no potential here. What am I going to do? Is sue this guy? He's got nothing. And there's really, but the bottom line is that there's a lot of these claims are being dropped. A lot of these charges are being dropped and not pursued by law enforcement. Take Milwaukee, where the Kia boys, I guess, are headquartered, if you will. In the Milwaukee Police Department has a no chase policy. They have they are not. The jails won't even accept people who are brought into jail for traffic violations, and that includes uninsured driving. So let's say now you look around the country, there are, believe it or not, how many people do you think are uninsured in America?
I don't know. I'm assuming way more than should be.
30 million uninsured drivers in the United States of America. That's 1 in 8. So as you're driving down the road and traffic's passing you going the other way, count 7 cars, the 8th one is uninsured. If he happens or she happens to put on makeup or text while they're driving and veer into your lane, there's a 1 in 8 chance that you are going to be left holding the bag for whatever injuries, catastrophic damages are sustained. So uninsured drivers, 30 million of them, nobody is doing anything about that. In fact, it's getting worse. But here comes subrogation. One of the functions of subrogation is it's starting to fill the role abdicated by law enforcement, by administrative, state and governmental administrative entities. they're not pursuing or making these drivers get insurance, but a number of our clients are now pursuing uninsured drivers and getting judgments against them. And of course, that is it's something rather than nothing. And a lot of these people are trying to ultimately pay off those damages. But so the individual responsibility comes up again. I mean, which states are worse for this? Michigan, Tennessee. Michigan has 25% uninsured drivers, and this is a state with no fault that's supposed to solve these problems. So there's that. We have extremely low limits throughout the country. I don't know, California, where everything is so expensive, has minimum limits of 15,000. I mean, that doesn't even pay for a bumper in California. So so even some uninsured tortfeasors are effectively uninsured. We can go to like the Texas freeze claims here in Texas. A couple of years ago, we had a very, I wasn't here then, but we had a very, very bad winter. And the Texas grid, Texas is often maligned because it's sort of off the national grid when it comes to power. But ERCOT, our energy provider here in the main energy system here, failed to winterize a lot of its infrastructure. As a result, things failed. Houses freezed. When you have a house that freezes, especially down in the south, pipes freeze, water bursts, you have water damage, you have all kinds of damage. And the insurance industry ended up picking up a significant tab for this. Now, MWL is subrogating on all those Texas freeze claims now. Mark Solomon, who's a partner in our Austin office, is overseeing that. But were it not for subrogation, most of these claims would simply fall to insurance and life would go on. But subrogated carriers are now making those responsible for causing those catastrophic losses pay. So the people responsible are actually having to pay. Same thing with car thefts. Carriers are subrogating, seeking restitution in cases where they're able to do that, whereas in a lot of situations, police are not pursuing car thieves. Ashton, I know you have some cases involving fracking and earthquakes that you might want to share, as well as I'll let the cat out of the bag, you having just appeared on Fox's Fox and Friends this Sunday for your handling of some of the George Floyd riot damages after the police department was ordered to stand down instead of letting them do their job.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of subrogation, is that we are able to get creative and we have some flexibility, because a lot of times our clients can pass out, they pass the puck to us and they let us go for it. And, our firm, MWL, we're the type that we will overturn every stone, make sure that if there is subrogation potential, we're going to find it. We're going to get creative. We don't care that there's no law on the issue or that maybe we have to create new law. Let's do it. And that's one thing that the subrogation industry is able to do and has done historically really, really well, is take some of these issues that on a one-off situation wouldn't necessarily be viable to pursue and to kind of create a change and create some law. But when combined together in numerous insurance claims through a subrogation action, we're able to do so. Example being, I recently, just a few years ago, was able to get seismologists and prove that fracking was causing earthquakes. Ended up in a 7-figure settlement, right? That was an issue that, nobody had thought at that point in time that could be the case. But we were able to show the exponential increase in earthquakes caused by fracking activity. In no way saying that fracking shouldn't be done. That's not my personal opinion. But the idea that, if there's going to be economic damage or environmental damages, it should be borne by the individual who caused it, right? That ended up causing some changes in the industry, right? It created a new precedent and a new, way to bring a case on something that just never appeared to exist in the first place. Another example, Gary, you'd mentioned it, is, I was just on Fox and Friends on Sunday, that was yesterday, talking about a case that I recently filed in Minneapolis, where we have filed suit against the city of Minneapolis in the George Floyd civil unrest and riots. Pretty much our argument is that, and we could do a whole podcast on this one too, general idea that their actions contributed to George Floyd's death, and they were incredibly negligent, neglectful. Didn't didn't really do anything to just calm the storm and to avoid further damage. Right? They basically sat there and let the city burn. And rather than policing, they'd made a political decision to abandon the third precinct, to not police, not give the police, the opportunity to do what they wanted to do what they're employed to do, and that is police and to bring order and assistance to the community. Instead, they decided, hey, rather than create any political fallout, let's just stop. Let's just stand down and let the city burn, right? Those are allegations, but that's one of those cases where my client in that case is very, very adamant about standing up for their policyholders. These are small businesses that have been forced out of business who aren't going to be able to reopen, right? Because of someone else's action, because of the because of the inaction of a tortfeasor, in that case, City of Minneapolis. So, we're able to step in these situations and really get creative. And that's what frankly, that's what I love about this job is that, of course, one, I love bringing back money to my clients, right? That's why I do this. I get to be a plaintiff's attorney, but with good clients. So that's kind of one of the best parts. But also, we do get to actually deal with some really cool things and be at the forefront of legal changes, legislative changes, and, changing judicial precedent. So it's good stuff. Right, Gary?
You bet. If anybody, there were a number of benefits, societal benefits that we went through rather quickly. And I appreciate you inquiring about some of the more obtuse ones, Ashton. If anybody wants to read that article, it is on our website. It's called The Societal Benefits of Subrogation. I am the author of that particular article. You can find it there. You can also just Google that title, my name, maybe even Google MWL in the search query. And I promise you it'll come up, and it goes into great detail on all, I was going to say 11, I'm now going to say 12 benefits of insurance subrogation.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And I'm also, that's why this podcast is so great too, because look, we just added another bullet point. We went from 11 to 12 and it's something that you prepared years ago and have been speaking on. So, when great minds come together, the results can be incredible. So Gary, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. For the audience, if there's any questions, I'm always available. Gary's always available. I can tell you Gary is constantly answering client questions, communicating with clients. So if anyone has any questions about subrogation in general, about the societal benefits of subrogation specifically, or maybe you're just, down on your day and, you need somebody to bolster you up about how amazing subrogation is, we're here for that. Right, Gary?
You bet. Thanks for having me on, Ashton.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Until next time, this is Ashton Kirsch signing off with the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Thank you.